Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Polly Stewart. Polly is the author of The Good Ones, which was nominated for a Lambda Literary Award, and The Felons Ball. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times and Good Housekeeping, among other publications, and she writes the monthly column, The Backlist for CrimeReads. She lives in Lexington, Virginia. And we are here to talk about your new book, Polly. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I'm a huge fan and I'm really just flattered to be here. So thank you.
This was such a fun book, and I love the family dynamic. I love the sister dynamic. So, before we dig into all the fun stuff about the Felons Ball, tell our listeners a little bit about the book.
Yes. So The Felons Ball is about a family in a small town in Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And in the past, they were involved with moonshining, which we might want to talk more about. But at this point, the family has gone legitimate. They're involved in other businesses, and every year they throw a huge party at their big house on the lake that they call the Felons Ball. So this is the father, Trey. It's kind of his main sort of way to show off to the community. But at this particular event, his best friend Ben is murdered. He doesn't realize that Ben is actually the secret lover of his youngest daughter, Natalie. She's the protagonist of the book and then gets pulled into a lot of family secrets that she didn't see coming.
Yes, old secrets, new secrets, so many secrets, which is so fun. So yeah, so tell us a little bit about, obviously this is, you live in Virginia, so there's some stuff that's close to home. I'm assuming you don't have a moonshine business on the side. So so tell us sort of what inspired you to write about this.
Yes, I did just get to write an essay on moonshining for CrimeReads, and it's not my family story whatsoever. But I did grow up in this part of Virginia where it's still a kind of a thriving industry, very much undercover because it's illegal, but it's sort of been around my whole life. And what I was interested in is people who are able to break the law with kind of an attitude of impunity where it doesn't seem to lead to any consequences to them, and to just their lives don't suffer at all. I was just really interested in following a family like that.
Yes, and it is true because in these smaller towns, if there's some kickbacks that go to the local, police officers. It all sort of a well-oiled machine. And this area also is on the water. So describe that a little bit because the water is a huge part of the book. Ben lived on a houseboat and this sort of, and it sounds beautiful. And also like it has a little, something about water is always a little eerie, maybe just to me, but yeah, where sort of tell us about that. Is it true to the area and what's that like?
Yes, so the McCready's live on a lake it's called Lake Monroe in the book, and it was modeled on some real life lakes in Georgia and North Carolina, Lake Lanier and Fontana Lake, that they were built by the WPA in the 30s, and they built them by damming rivers and flooding the nearby valleys where people were already living. So people were sort of told, you have to pack up and leave. They were paid off. But I was so interested in that dynamic, this idea of these towns that were inundated, regardless sort of how the residents felt about it, and then the sort of residue that might leave behind in terms of again, secrets from the past and the effect that might have on the present.
Yeah, and a little residue too, like what's at the bottom of the water. I think that's maybe why water is always this sort of, it's got this eerie element because you just really don't know what's down there, right? And okay, so when you start, I'm always curious about everyone's process. So when you started the Felons Ball, did you sort of know, are you somebody who sort of outlines the whole thing before you go? Did you know all the characters, or do you start with a sort of premise? You start with a character? What's your process?
Yeah, whenever I talk about this with other writers, I always want to hear from them too. Do you want to share about yours? But to me, it's different from every book, and I wished I could figure out like a system that worked. So my first novel, The Good Ones, I worked on for 4 years. I was just sort of happily, because I wasn't really thinking about it being published, so I was just sort of happily playing around with it, trying to write a story that really inspired me. With the Felons Ball, with the second book, you feel some pressure to produce something, and luckily, the story came incredibly easily. The family came to mind, the youngest daughter, who's the main character, and it all just kind of came together from there. Now I'm working on my third book, and it's not like that at all. It's very,
Well,
very.
I'd say, yeah, that isn't, I mean, that isn't, I am not, I'm not a plotter. So for me, it's always about getting, I'm in the middle of trying to do that now with a new book, getting into it and trying to figure out like, which way are we going? Whose voice is most important? And yeah, I feel like I'm treading water until I sort of catch a tiny wave and then I hang on for dear life. But I'm curious to know also, the sophomore book is like people talk about that, right? Because like you said, you had 4 years to write the first book. And then of course the second book, they're like, we'd like to have a book in a year. What was that like? Was it, I mean, what was it like going into it and how do you feel after? Are there things that you would say to like, to people who are about to sort of start on their second book?
Yeah, so I had started another one before I worked on for about 6 months as The Good Ones was coming out, and I sent it to my agent and my editor, and they said this is not working. So I was kind of panicking, and I said to my agent, "Well, I have this other idea about a moonshining family," and she said, "Well, that sounds good." And I wrote the first chapter in a weekend and just sort of skated on from there. And I would hope for that kind of luck for everyone else at this point.
Yeah.
I don't, it was just, yeah, I just happened to hit the right story at the right time. But
Yeah,
yeah.
and I mean, we've all had those words from an agent or editor, like this isn't working. It's pretty traumatizing, right? You're just like, well, this is, especially since I'm really a one book at a time kind of person. I'm not somebody who's got 50 ideas on a spreadsheet, like ready to roll. If the one idea isn't working, then yeah, that's very, very stressful. So, but you just picked it up and kept going. So good for you.
Maybe that means I work best under pressure. I don't know. Maybe someone to call me up right now and say, finish this book immediately. That might help.
So, okay, so do you have this, and it sounds like you are an organic writer. You're not necessarily a plotter. You sort of followed, you met Natalie in your mind and were like, it's her story, and so you followed her through. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, I'd say
Kind
so. I've never related to the plotter and pantser idea. I wouldn't because I'm so sort of like organized in the rest of my life. I don't.
Yes.
It's hard for me to think of myself as a pantser, but the more I do this, the more I realize outlining has just never worked for me. If I do it, then I get bored by the outline and I want to change it. So yes,
And
I'm a
I
little.
don't, yeah, I'm the same. I'm so type A. I mean, I have lists and spreadsheets for spreadsheets, and I love being so organized. Everything has a place. People who live with me go crazy because they're like, we didn't move it that far. But I can't for whatever reason. I feel the same way. So I don't know that it sounds like it would be like if you're really organized, you would outline a story, but I actually don't know if that's even really how it works. I think it's more of like, how does the magic come to you? And for some people, it comes like in a more sort of looking forward kind of way, and for others, you have to be in it. So
That's
that's my excuse for those organized people who can't outline.
yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one. It's
No, no.
crazy.
And I would say actually, I would feel like in the, we're almost at 200 episodes of Killer Women. And I would say I ask this question maybe half the time. And I would say probably fewer than half of those people outline. I don't feel like that. I don't feel like it seems like I think this is because, like you said, the pantsers or the non-outliners are like, ooh, that sounds like such a smart idea that we don't do it. So, um, anyway, so tell me a little bit about, you're obviously raising kids and stuff. So do you have a sort of schedule for how you work? Do you work outside of writing? I mean, so what's your sort of like, what's a day in the life of?
Yes, yeah. Well, I do have a full-time college teaching job during the year. So I teach literature and creative writing, which is very generative from my work, but it's tiring. Luckily, I'm a morning person, so my husband and I both get up at 5. He makes me coffee, but then he leaves me alone, which is great. And
Perfect.
I have a couple hours to work before the kids get up. So that schedule has worked for me so far, and then I try to do most of my kind of heavy duty drafting during the summer.
Okay, right, because you have summers off, which is lovely, which is we're in the middle of summer. It's nice that your books come out in summer too, because that gives you the chance to, talk to, be on a little bit lesser of a schedule so you can do fun things. And now, right now, you're in Michigan. If you can see, if you're watching us, you can see that behind Polly is a beautiful wooded area. She's up in Michigan. For how long are you there?
We're actually leaving tomorrow.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
so
are. Okay.
I have to get back because my book comes out on Tuesday. So we had to
Oh,
kind of
right. That's so exciting. I forgot about that so soon. Wow, we really caught you at the tail end. So I have a question for you. Are you a sister? Where does that sort of, because there's a really lovely dynamic between the three sisters. It has all the sort of normal tension and push-pull and two against one and all that, the fun drama. So where does that come from?
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot to me because I didn't grow up with sisters, so I was a little nervous about writing this book for that reason. But I've always wanted a sister, and I realized when I started writing this, I thought, well, there's this way that that having a sister would be in my mind, which would be this like incredible closeness, and it's like, your second self, but it's probably not like that in real.
Sometimes, I mean, at least my experience, right?
Yeah, but I tried to build in some real kind of resentment from the past and some real differences to their personality because I feel like there would be just as much friction in many relationships as there is intimacy.
Yes, and I think also the dynamic of all the different girls with their parents, right? I mean, Natalie is her dad's favorite, and and the way that their mother is, and it all just feels like a very sort of well fleshed out family. Let's go back to the moonshining for a second. Obviously, what sort of did you do? Did you research? Did you go and drink moonshine, Polly, so that you could figure out how to write this book? I'm just curious to know, what was the process for for understanding that?
That's too funny. Yeah, so I had kind of taken it for granted that people knew that moonshine was still a thing, and then I'm sure, like my publishing teams in New York, and talking to them, I realized sort of people do think of it as more of a historical phenomenon. But I was offered moonshine for the first time in college, and I do have friends, around town where I live now who still kind of have a supply. And I really couldn't tell you where it comes from because all of that is pretty secretive. But it's to me, I love that idea that here at a time in history when we're very into like making things on our own, and people brew beer at home.
Yeah, yeah.
That same phenomenon.
Why is it illegal still if we can brew beer at home? I'm curious.
It's a good question. I mean, it's untaxed, and I think obviously the government kind of reserves the right to tax alcohol, and but
Sure.
I'm not sure why it's different than beer. That's a good question.
Yeah, because we home brew, I guess if you're selling it, maybe. I got my MFA in Charlotte, North Carolina, at Queen's University, and one of the professors there had lost her husband, and she came to the bar with two of these, huge mason jars that looked like they were basically looked like peaches. They looked like they were, canned or jarred peaches, but they were not. They were moonshine. And in honor of her and of him, it was the only time I've ever had moonshine, but it was like, well, tasted like peach syrup to me, but boy, yeah, it had some kick. And I guess that's illegal to say that I drank it, but there it was. I did. I'm confessing on the air, and it was quite good. So if you have the chance, right? I think it's kind of a fun. Obviously, I guess it has to be made safely. I don't know. Can it be dangerous? Maybe that's part of it.
I think it could be, and when I've been offered it, it's always been from trusted sources. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess we don't want to encourage viewers to.
Yeah, right. Right. Don't drink something from an unknown source. Actually, in general, right? I hope I don't have to say that to people, but maybe I do. So, well, so you didn't have to do necessarily a lot of research because you kind of grew up knowing about it, and Because you
Yeah,
have the kind of sugar and all the things about what was, what goes into it, and because Natalie finds the supplies and
yeah. Yeah, what I didn't know was there were some big federal raids in my part of Virginia in the 90s that kind of shut it down to a large extent to the point where I think home distillers are the only ones making it anymore. I mean, to my understanding, it's not really made for commercial sale, even locally. So I was interested to learn about that and just the fact that it still managed to go on.
yeah. I mean, I think it does seem to me also like the historical element of it, right? People have there's probably, I mean, the McCready family there's some definite sort of pride, and even though it's illegal, right? There's some pride in sort of the work they did, if you will, in the moonshining, which is, it feels authentic to me. I can totally understand if that was that's how you supported your family back in the day. It's probably hard to let those things go, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's similar to where you are. Appalachians are very independent. They don't like to be told what to do, and I'm certainly not condoning, breaking the law in the service of that. But you can kind of see where it comes from for some people.
Absolutely no, yeah. And no, nothing our characters do are necessarily things that we're saying we would do, right? That is not how this gig works. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now? I know sometimes it feels, but
I think I'm far enough in to talk about it, but it's the novel's called The Glass House, and it's set in a wilderness area in Virginia where there's been a series of murders of women across like a 15-year period, and the question is sort of are they related, or the local law enforcement wants to think that they're not, and then there's a pair of mothers and daughters living close by, and we kind of get pulled into their stories.
got it. So yeah, I was going to ask who the main characters are. Is it the moms and daughters?
Yes, yeah. So one woman's a photographer who's sort of been documenting the area, and then her sister who lives in a farm nearby. So again, we have more sisters.
Yeah, you're like I'm gonna have sisters in all my books since I didn't get one in real life. I mean, and obviously we talk about sort of a lot on Killer Women, sort of the idea of women's stories and what it is that's interesting to tell about them. And so I guess I would ask just what do you think was sort of the most compelling reason or reasons for Natalie, being in Natalie's point of view. Like, what was it about her that you're like, I want to, because you spend a year with this person, right? It's like, it really is like dating a new person. You have to sort of really be enamored to stick around. So, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's such a great question because it's something I think about a lot. Writing in the part of the South that I do, it can be kind of associated with what people call like grit lit, or sort of the rural noir. These more sort of like male-centered
Yeah.
subgenres. And to me, I'm interested. These crimes when they happen in two families and around families, and so even if women aren't necessarily like involved in the crimes themselves, they're adjacent to them, and that's really what I'm interested in, is how crime affects women across the board, whether they're the perpetrators or the victims, or just kind of involved in some way, because it's different, I think, than the way men get involved in crime. It's for different reasons. It has different effects on the family, and that's kind of what I want to get into.
Yeah. I mean, so tell us a little bit more about that. I'm curious, I mean, obviously, there's lots of ways in which it's different for us, but what's at the core of that, do you think? Why is it different for us? Is it more
Oh,
personal because we're oftentimes the victims? Is it more personal because if we're parents, there's something different about being a mother than being a father? Like, I mean, I guess it kind of there's a million, not to discount fatherhood, but right? I mean, am I touching on some of them?
yeah, I mean, there's this line I quote so often in interviews. I feel like I hope people don't get sick of it. But I was interviewing Laura Lippman a couple years ago, and she said to live as a teenage girl in America is to be cast in a noir film. And
That's
but all
interesting.
the time, right? And even more so now, women just go through their lives with the acknowledgement that they could be victims, right? It's something we just build into our consciousness.
Yep.
So I think it's different in that way. And as you said, being a mother, whether it's a mother of a daughter and fearing for her, or feeling like we have to teach our sons about, their responsibilities. It's very different, I think, and
Yeah.
builds in a different awareness.
I love that. I'm gonna remember that quote because yikes, right? And it's not in, as Laura says, it's not everywhere, right? Being a teenager in America. So I think that is really telling. And maybe that's I mean, I think that's part of why I write what I write, right? Is to explore sort of, you know, part of it feels like you're telecasting how you would manage, how you would handle it if you were going to be a victim or, or if you needed to be a perpetrator needed. But I'd also to explore sort of the darkest parts of human nature in order to try to understand them, I guess. I don't, it's a weird draw, right?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I'm very much a catastrophic thinker, so I think it is partly just like wishful thinking. If I imagine these things, they won't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's no, I think you have it's dead on exactly right. So it's so exciting. Well, I so t tell our listeners where they can follow you and watch for everything, website, social media. Where are you hanging out?
Yes, so I'm at Polly Stewart on Instagram and Facebook. My website is pollystewart.com, and I'm going on tour next week. A lot of dates in the South and in New York, so hoping to see some people out on the road.
So exciting. Well, we will, yeah, everyone will link your Instagram, put up a little fun teaser from this video so folks can find you and then go ahead and hopefully join you for one of your events. That's so fun. I don't imagine you're coming to Montana. Nobody comes to Montana, but I'll miss you on the road. But Polly, I so enjoyed the Felons Ball. Congratulations.
Thank you. This was such a pleasure, Danielle, and I hope to see you maybe at BoucherCon or Thriller Fest sometime.
Yes, yes, I'm gonna be. Are you coming to BoucherCon?
Yes, I'll be there.
I will be there as well. So BoucherCon is the World Mystery Convention, which is happening the weekend after Labor Day this year in New Orleans. So if anybody's interested in that, it's really fun. It's tons of authors and readers and bookstagrammers, and we have more fun than probably should. So, and everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on Killer Women with Polly Stewart, and we will see you next time. Bye.